So glad you're back. Thanks for joining me. This is Tips and Tricks. My name is Susan Summers, and we are going to do another three-part series focused on the slow etude for the auditions this year, etude number 5. So we're going to do the first third of it today, and then we'll finish it in a couple of weeks. And we are going to focus on a practice technique that I find incredibly useful, and I don't hear a lot of students doing it, so I thought I would talk about it. And that is, what goes up must come down. So let me explain what that means. If we're looking at the lines in the music, we can usually divide them into two categories for the most part, ascending and descending lines. And I like to have days where I practice the ascending lines only and days where I practice the descending lines only, because the voicing is so different. So as we go up higher, we need the vibrations to be felt higher in the body. And of course, the air pressure mounts up as we go higher as well. And then the opposite of that when we're descending. So if we're not able to be aware and focus on those things while we're playing, we can have tuning problems. Sometimes notes will come out in a different octave than we intended them to do. And often it can be very frustrating, of course, and we may not even know why that happened. And so I think this type of practice is particularly useful. So we're going to do a little bit of that together today. So if you don't have your oboe out, go ahead and get that ready to go, because we're going to play through some of this together so that you can experience what I'm talking about. So we're going to start with the upward lines. And those are the lines, the measures that are in blue. They're highlighted in blue, and then I've listed them over to the right. So these are lines that start low and change register by the end of the momentum that we're building. So if we look at measure 1, right, that's a great place to start. We start on a G in the staff, and we're building up to the B. And if I play the B, voicing it the same as the G, it's going to sound really flat and dull and unfocused. So the first thing I like to do is I'll play the first note, the G, and then I'll play the last note, which in this case is the B. And if you have a hard time hearing tuning, that's very normal. We all have to learn how to do that. I would encourage you to get your tuner out. And what we want to do is we want to look at the tuner, and I have mine here next to my computer. I want to look at the tuner, and I want to see, where does my G register? Doesn't matter if it's in tune, just where is it? Is it 10 cents sharp? Is it 2 cents sharp? Is it 10 cents flat? Hopefully not. But to see where it is, and then we're going to play the B, and we're going to check that as well, so that we know our tuning tendencies for that. So play the G and just look at your tuner. And then play the high B. My tuning tendencies are on this interval is that the G will probably be slightly too high and the B will slightly be too low. And so that makes the interval too close together. Now, luckily for us, we have extra notes in the middle to kind of bridge that gap. But you need to know what is likely going to be the tuning issue so that we can listen for it and then feel confident we know how to fix it. So we're going to try playing as written, but I'm going to have the metronome on at 60 so that we can be nice and slow. We're just going to play the highlighted part of measure 1 right here, this part, okay? I'll count off a measure, and let's do that. 1 and 2. And you can hold the B longer if you want to, just to give yourself time to check the tuning. So what I like to do is I like to listen to it and then figure out what I think it is. Is it flat? Is it sharp? How much is it flat? How much is it sharp? Then I let my eyes drift over to the tuner to check and see, did I actually hear the right thing? So that's the best way to use the tuner. We could also do this with a drone. That's the best way, honestly, to work on tuning, is to do it by listening, but the tuner is probably easier for you to get a hold of right now. Okay, so now think about what happened with the tuning, and then we're going to try it again. And if your high note was too low, probably what happened is we didn't voice high enough. How do we do that? Just draw your attention up higher in your face. Wherever your attention goes, the vibrations are going to go. So just pay more attention to like your nose area, your nasal cavity, okay? If your high note was sharp and you weren't sharp before that, you were probably biting. You're probably trying to do too much work here. So what we want to try and do is not use the embouchure as much and instead use our resonance chamber to compensate for that. I know that can sound really weird if you haven't heard that before. Let's do it again. Same thing. 1 and 2. Okay, and I'm just listening to myself to try and be in tune with myself. That's the most important thing. I'm not really trying to be perfectly in tune with the tuner. That's great if you want to work on that, but start with being in tune with yourself. So if I were doing this, I would practice that until I felt like I made progress, and then I would move on to the next spot. And you can see all of these spots. Most of them are about the same amount of length as far as how long it takes you to play, with the exception of 14. That's just a quickie. The B to the D is such a big leap, and D is so finicky that I included that in there. So I would have an upward momentum day, an up day, where you just practice these and you're thinking about voicing so that you know what you need to do to make it easy to play in tune with yourself, and you're not having to work so hard to make the high notes in tune with the low notes. Okay? Then we can move on to the downward lines. And this is like the opposite of that, which is why I like to do it on a different day. So if we're starting at the top, this is going to be more air pressure. It's going to be higher in the body. And then as we descend, less and less air pressure, and the vibrations will start to descend with the sound that we're hearing lower into the body. So this is a big change, even though that may not seem that far apart. G on top of the staff feels really different on the oboe than B below the staff. So can we try those two notes? Because I want you to feel what they feel like. So play the G, maybe close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or look down away from the screen. And I want you to see where you feel the vibrations. So just hold it for a few seconds. And then let's do B below the staff and see where you feel that. So for me, they are in drastically different places. The G was kind of more up here, and the low B was more in my chest cavity. Okay, so you may not even feel anything if this is really new for you, and that is okay, right? So you'll learn to do that. You're just going to draw your awareness to it, and then you'll start to pay attention to it. So let's just go ahead for practice, and let's try measure 4, and then hold the low B for just a few seconds when you get there, so you can check your tuning. 1 and 2. So I can feel it kind of descend as I'm playing that line. So how I feel and what I see on the page, they go hand in hand, and they should, okay? So again, I have these lines marked separately. All the yellow highlighted passages are downward momentum passages. And then we're left with lucky measure 11. And I have a donkey here because I'm sure you've noticed that when we're bouncing back and forth between different registers, we often sound kind of like a donkey. It's not so great. So we have to work at that. So measure 11 is its own special thing that you can practice. So I just wanted to mention that you can break this measure up in many different ways. You could just practice the top line notes, the C, B, A, G sharp, and then maybe the A of the next measure to resolve. Then you could also practice just on downward day. You could practice C to D, and then B to D, and then A to D, and then G sharp to D. And of course, the inverse of that on upward day, you could do D to B, D to A, and D to G sharp, right? And it's just that back and forth. So if you can break that measure down I would strongly suggest practicing it that way, and then maybe also practicing it as written with the metronome on really, really slowly, so that you have time to think about what you need to do to get to the next note. So basically, recap of this lesson is that make sure you're aware of, am I going up or am I going down, especially if you don't normally think of that. That really can make a big difference if you're just more aware of it. Ask yourself, where do you feel the sound in your body? If it's a high note, it should be higher, and if it's a low note, it should be lower, and of course, middle's in between. And it's not an exact science because everybody's physically different, but be aware that you can drastically change things by drawing your awareness to a different part of your body, and thus drawing the vibrations to a different part of your body, and then maybe you won't have to work so hard on that note. If you are failing all around on this and you're like, God, I can't do this, it really could be your reed. So maybe try some different reeds. If your reed is unstable and you just can't jump octaves and basically stay in tune, this is fruitless. So don't use a reed like that. It's gonna make you so frustrated. Play with a drone. We talked today about using the tuner, but I often do this type of practice with a drone on. So you can, pick whatever pitch is appropriate for the section that you're doing and have that playing so that you can do the tuning by listening and tuning intervals rather than just staring at the tuner. And my last bit of advice for today is just to practice singing. You do not have to be a singer to sing. I'm not a trained singer. I sing all the time because I enjoy it, but even if it's not enjoyable for you, there's something about vocalizing music that will make it easier to play on your instrument. So I encourage you, even if it's not the right pitches, to try and vocalize it and see how that impacts the way that you play. All right, guys, that's the end of today's video. We will keep going with the middle section of this etude next week. And if you have any questions about this or comments or requests, please feel free to leave those down below in the discussion area, and I will get to it. I'll reply and I'll include more information if I need to in the next video. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will see you next week. Bye.